I've listened to you talk for a long time about the best ones you've ever coached. They had one thing in common at least, and they were willing to take coaching, no matter how good they were. Future first-round draft pick, still taking coaching like he's a kindergartner. I heard you talking the other day. You just started spring around here, and you said some guys, man, they get almost offended when you want to coach them. And you've been through this stuff forever, so it's almost like old hat. It's just here we go again, but they're going through it for the first time. So how do you handle it without being so jaded and negative and trying to kind of figuratively shake him and say, hey, this is the way it's got to be if you're ever going to maximize your potential?
Yeah, it's a decision they have to make. I mean, the choice when you came here was I chose hard. I chose getting coached. And constructive criticism is good for you to develop. And a lot of schools and coaches don't want to do that. So we still do it here. We do it hard. And most of our good players, like you mentioned, they embrace that. They want that. Brock Bowers comes and says, how can I get better? Show me another way. It's the same way for Devontae Wyatt or Javon Bullard. They want to be coached. They want you to teach them how to do it. And I don't know that the masses, the large numbers of the culture we're dealing with now, these kids don't really want to be coached hard. So they got to make a decision. If they come here, they're going to be.
Do you ever, like when you quality control everything you do, ultimately the responsibility falls on you. When you lose, the onus falls on you, and then that downstream of that is your staff. Sure. But when you guys are in a staff meeting and you're not feeling that guys are taking coaching, at some point, like it's got to be on them, but from your vantage point, from your perspective, on your side of the fence, what different measures can you enact to try and sort of expedite that process?
I think a better relationship with the kid, it starts with that. I mean, I call in a couple kids a day and just say, hey, what's going on? Want to make sure that we're reaching you the right way. Do you understand why we're trying to help you and the way we're going about it? And make sure the kid knows that it's really for his long-term benefit. Entitlement's always been part of our society. Entitlement has grown into athletes. I mean, most athletes grow up entitled. He's the best one to do this, so he gets pushed along whether he deserves it or not. But I think it's at an alarming rate right now in terms of there's an entitlement of more people. So they don't end up successful in year 5, 6, 7. They think they're successful in year 1, 2, 3, but we're going to see the effect of this. They're not going to be where they need to be 5, 6, 7 because they don't handle the criticism that comes with it.
You got a theory about why that's more prevalent today? Everyone just automatically says, well, with social media, and then there's a ... whatever comes after that. But it seems like most people's theory stems from the change in technology and then behavior being downstream of technology. You have a multi-pronged theory. Is there one thing you point to? Is it irrelevant because it is what it is either way?
It probably is irrelevant because we've got to find a way around it, regardless of what the cause is. Our job is to get them to buy into a team culture and get them to buy in what's best for you, yourself, individually, selfishly. What do you want to achieve? The best way to do that is mimic what's been done in the past, and that's like buy in, like learn, take the coaching, take the criticism, grow from that. You can't have growth without it. But I mean, a lot of it stems from reading about themselves. The media attention around recruiting has increased every year. So every kid comes in with a bubble built around them to have a force field to protect them from growth and criticism. They need to break that down in order to grow. So, and what's great is that a lot of the kids, once they realize it and understand it, they learn from our older players because our older players are ingrained that, or really the players that come back. All the guys we've had around the NFL, they're all here in our building. They're here every day. So they share with them. Nolan Smith, Javon Bullard, Brock Bowers, they're all here. And what they learn from those guys is, it's okay for me to be corrected by a coach. It's okay for me to find a better way. And my way may not be the best way. That's what we try to impart with them.
The other part of that is that old quote, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man can be the king. Mm-hmm. If you are in a world where it's like that all over the place, you may not even be as good and as dialed in and as great at accepting constructive criticism as the previous generation. But if you can ever sell a guy that if you just get part of the way, if you just start to show the characteristics, you're going to stand out so much more. It's going to be like a lighthouse in an ocean. You're going to stand out so much more around a lot of these guys. I got to imagine if it clicks for one guy and the rest of the locker room or organization starts to see the reciprocal effect of that, I got to imagine that's the best teaching point.
It is. The moving the guys that are neutral over here to the positive side, and maybe the guys that aren't good at handling it to neutral, that's your ultimate goal as a leader of the organization. How do we reach more people? How do we get more to buy in? Well, we put it on that screen. When we come here in the team meeting, here it is. This is the kind of effort. I need to see fire and passion out of you. I need to know that for those 60 minutes of practice, 120 minutes of practice, I need to know that you got fire and passion and energy. This is what that looks like. That rep right there was competitive fire, passion, and energy. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter what other skill sets you have, because you will get passed by someone who has that. And we started to put more and more priority on that in recruiting, less size, speed qualities, and does he love it?
Yeah. How much of a shock to the senses is it for most guys when they come into a place like this from high school and they see how much razor sharp focus and intensity is put into every little minute detail? As something as simple as a rep, we're in a team meeting room right now. Mm-hmm. You could put one of my slot receiver reps on the board. You could break it down for 15 minutes. That probably never happened to me in high school.
Correct.
Not to mention we're practicing, as you said, in about an hour, 20-minute period. That's something I used to have 3 hours to do. Yes. So you got the cardio piece as well. Yeah. How big a shock to the senses? That's got to be like cold water in the middle of the night for a lot of guys.
It is, and we had less cold water in the past. So when you add the fact that you've got 33 to 40 new people in your organization, it's crazy how much that changes. I've done a new exercise this spring of putting cut-ups of 21, 22, 23 spring behind 25 spring. Okay, so 25 spring is what we're doing now. I watch 21 spring, then the next day I say, okay, we're going to put 22 spring behind it on the same day of practice. And it's crazy, the difference. And you're like, well, those are really good teams. Well, yeah, they're really good teams, but they're being measured within a 5-year span against each other, and there's not as much depth. There's much more younger players. There's sloppiness. There's not as much attention to detail. So how do we grow those guys and get them better? We're just dealing with more new guys who can't sustain, but we have to have patience and grow them, because a lot of those guys are going to be our 2s, sometimes our 1s.
That right there, so sitting in the head coach's chair, and you've won championships. You got a bunch of trophies all around this building, so like you know what it looks like when it's the way it's supposed to be. I think probably typical human nature would be, if you see a little drop off, we're 85% of what we once were. Mm-hmm. Human nature would be to look around and say, yeah, but everyone in the country is dealing with that. And then it's up to you to say, I don't really care what's happening outside this building. Sure. Like the way it looked in 21, that's the way it's supposed to look. And if it doesn't look that way, then we're not where we need to be. I don't know, I guess other people do that, but not everyone has a 2021 version of themselves that look that good.
And that what you just described is the standard is the standard. So like, that's what people say, but what do you mean the standard is the standard? Well, the standard, which is those past years, is the standard. And so we're measuring ourselves against that, not against the rest of the field. At times, I do succumb to I have to accept that it's different now.
Yeah.
Portal rates are higher. NIL is higher. There's more transiency among us. So should I accept less? And I wrestle with that, because I do want to hold to that standard, but we don't have that same depth. We don't have those same numbers. So we have to manage the new standard better than anybody else while still holding the players to the old standard, which is what some guys around here created a couple years ago.
Where's the needle got to be? Like, I mean, how good a sense do you have to have of your organization and the outside world to know, on one hand, here are my non-negotiables. On the other hand, my roster looks totally different in terms of average rate of experience than it did 4 years ago. I may need to bend a little here. In other words, defining your non-negotiables versus begrudgingly some things that I can bend on, and knowing when to do that. Like knowing when things have changed enough to say, all right, compartment C here. Yeah, I guess we can change that 15%. How do you have the vision to know when to do that?
Well, I think it's instincts. I think it's, for me, it's looking at somebody and saying, okay, I can't be non-negotiable on effort, toughness, and these DNA qualities we have. I can't, that's a non-negotiable. You are gonna have those things or you're not gonna play. But you have to do more to explain to a young man why those values have to happen. I'm trying to speed up a process that you can't speed up. Yep. I feel like I'm going through it every year. I'm like, okay, I've seen this. It takes 2 years for this guy to be completely ready to play. That's toughness, calloused, importance, attention to detail, focus. He can do all things. He can sustain practice. He's strong enough in the weight room. It really takes 2 years for that. We don't have 2 years. So how do you speed that up? Well, you don't. It takes 2 years. So like you don't, it's not like a magic growth pill we give them and they just all of a sudden snap out and do it. So you have to be prepared to play with kids that might not be ready. And you've got to have yours more ready than the opponent has theirs ready.
You were talking the other day in one of your media availabilities. And I mean, back in the day, your third and fourth year guys, those are the guys you're looking at to be the linchpins.
Yep.
You know, those are the pillars, and then everything else sort of gravitates around them. You hope they take ownership of their room. I heard you say the other day, my experienced guys, and then you paused and you said, now, by experienced, I count a second-year guy as experienced now.
Yeah.
I mean, would you ever have heard yourself saying that 10 years ago?
Absolutely not. The second-year guys were in the middle of trying to figure out who they were. First-year guys were trying to survive. All right, and then your third and fourth-year guys were the vets that were leading things around. And I did the exercise of come up here if you've been through 3 spring practices at Georgia. And it was a lonely spot. You know, where if I'd done that last year, we would have had a lot of guys. So it's not just new guys, it's experienced guys. And I think, you know, you create these teams that have won have usually had a lot of seniors, a lot of experience. You go back to our 2 teams that won. Michigan's team was just loaded with guys that had been around. Ohio State had a lot of guys that had been in the organization. So I'm leaning more on retention and keeping people in the organization rather than chasing and going out and just trying to get talent. How long can I keep the same people in here so I've got good core guys that have been in the culture for years?
Obviously, portal attrition has to do with a lot of this, and the way it's, I don't know, shaved the tops of the tallest trees off in the sport a little bit. Now, I have no clue what the next iteration of the revenue sharing era is going to do to change that. You're on top of that, so you're in that world. Last year I was here, and we spoke about the fact that if you could have nothing more than just knowing who's going to be on your roster in the fall, that'd be great. That'd be a blessing. So now we're a year further down the road. We got a new horizon that's right here on us with RevShare. How does that fundamentally impact Georgia?
The new rev share?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, because I don't know exactly the way it's going to be dialed out in this settlement that's going to come from the court in California that's right up upon us here in April. We'll know a lot more after April. I think the biggest thing in college football that's about to happen is the interpretation of how teams are going to have money outside of cap. Okay, so there's going to be a clearinghouse, right? The clearinghouse is going to look at the deal, and they're going to judge, is this deal fair market value? That is the biggest entity.
Yeah.
That's the biggest misnomer out there on all of recruiting going on right now. The people say, well, the valuation, NIL, this is what this kid's valued at. Well, we're under a new market. We're under a new regime. We're going to be under Deloitte looking at deals and saying whether or not they're fair market value, and the policing of that is what's going to navigate the future of college football. Because if we're all at the same cap, there's not going to be a lot of problems. But it's who gets money above the cap. How are you manipulating that money above the cap? And can it be manipulated? Or will it be truly scrutinized the same way? And what the intent of NIL was to make legitimate deals, will that follow? Will somebody get penalized who tries to stretch it? And what is that penalty? Everybody's going to be watching in the next 365 days to see what happens, because it will determine college football's future on how they navigate and police this.
I get the sense, correct me if your perspective is different, I get the sense that a majority of head coaches out there hope that the new enforcement model is really rock solid and it is enforceable, and then it does it levels things out based on what conference you're in. I also would imagine, without naming names, you probably think of them right off the top of your head of guys who are probably totally dependent on still being able to bend that market and exploit that market and take advantage of the above cap number. If it does come that they can enforce that, and if it does come that everything above and beyond the cap is true market value, how much does that fundamentally change the way the sport looks and also the retention numbers that you used to have that you don't have so much anymore?
Yeah, I think it makes the sport more parity. I think it just settles some things down in college football, but I don't know that it's going to stop. It's going to help retention. You would think it would help retention, but there's going to be a large pool of money that everybody's going to be shopping for. And, you know, what one school loves, another school may love more. And so you're going to see kids get opportunities. They're still going to be tampering. They're not going to stop tampering. They haven't been able to control tampering. There's still going to be guys shopping, still going to be agents shopping. But the pool of money that the agents are shopping for may be more under control. Because as it is right now, a lot of the agents that represent the kids think that there's just an unlimited budget. They think that you have unlimited amount, and they don't think about the entire roster. We're not dealing with a 53-man roster. We're paying a lot of players. So if you actually put that number in a box, it's going to flatten the line out, and it'll settle somewhere to where, okay, we can look at comps now. We can look and see what this guy is, what this guy, and that would even things out. But I still think there's going to be a lot of movement because our society says, if I don't get what I want, I need to go somewhere else. And there's not a lot of sticking power. Kids say, well, you know what, I didn't get it there, I got to go try somewhere else. And most of the kids that have left and gone somewhere else, they end up in the same situation at where they went that they were in when they left.
You're now several years in now. So now you got case study of guys who you sat down before with and had a tough conversation, and you flat out said, I'm not going to offer you as much as they are because that doesn't make sense for us. Yeah. It may make sense for you on the front end to take that amount, but you're being very penny wise, pound foolish. Now, that is Kirby Smart's opinion being given to a player. He does with it whatever he does with it. And, 5 years ago, you didn't have an example to point to. Right. Well, now you've got several examples to point to. How fundamentally has that changed some of the conversations to where a guy may have previously doubted what you're saying, but now there's the example, there's example B, there's example C, or is it still largely just, sorry, but I got to go chase it right now?
Yeah. The case by case, because the case study you're referencing might be great if someone's willing to listen to that, but if someone's in a situation financially that they think I have to take the most now, disregard that case situation. That was their situation. It has nothing to do with me. I need the larger sum now. There's families out there that are going to choose the larger number for that reason. The end game may not be as good for them, and there'll be case studies that say the end game may not be as good for you. But if things level out like we want them to, there shouldn't be these inequities between what guys are going to get offered. It should be closer to the same, and a kid will choose where he wants to go to school based on the education, the coach, the longevity, the development, all the things it used to be, and it won't be primarily money number one if things balance out some. But I do think those case studies are getting there, but it's still about who you're having that conversation with, because there's a lot of families we talk to that are like, we're taking NIL out. We don't want to talk about that. We want to find the best fit for our son and then go from there. Because the money to be made is much more on the back end.
Yeah. We're in a room where there's a lot of numbers on the wall that designate conference championships, national championships, and whatnot. You always talk about the standard being the standard around here. Probably one of the most glaring examples of that for me is last year. Because I think back last year with Georgia, it feels so weird. You guys are in the hundreds in some of the rushing statistics. Yeah. You guys are outside where I'm usually used to you being in total defense. Yeah. And then you got a conference championship ring on your finger when the dust settles anyway. And you're in the playoffs when the dust settles anyway. And you come up short in the playoffs, but I think about Georgia and I think, man, that team seemed off the pace a little bit. Yeah. But yet I'm used to judging you against such a standard that I feel you fell a little short of the standard. You still got a conference championship ring on your finger. When you're retired, you can look back on each individual year, and a year brings a thought to your mind. Yeah. You're still pretty close to 24. But granted, when you look back on 24, like, how does that year strike you? What do you remember about that?
Best coaching job we've done by far, 100%. We were not as good as some of the years previous, and we had twice the schedule some of the years previous. So to the naysayers, to the onlookers, to the people that don't know, I respect everybody's opinion. You can have an opinion, you can do what you want with it. I know football, and I know the level of schedule we had to play, and I know the roster we did it with, and I know the injuries we had. By far and away, the best job that our staff and our organization has done, easily, to go through the gauntlet we went through. Number one, to get into the SEC championship was an accomplishment with that schedule, because they don't make the SEC schedule like they do the NCAA basketball pool, where they say the quality of wins you have. They don't do that. They just do it sheerly off who are the top two teams in the conference. Well, we were able to do that. Then we were able to win that game, okay, which was in and of itself an accomplishment. And then we went on and played a really good Notre Dame team and didn't play our best game in that opportunity and had some faulty special teams plays, and they beat us. But all in all, I was very pleased with what we got out of our team, and it was below the standard statistically in a lot of areas, but a lot of that had to do with the schedule we played.
I'm watching the SEC championship game, and I'm feeling like you've already got the issues you're dealing with. Yeah. I've already felt like watching you, you're trying to plug 12 holes with 10 fingers the whole year, and you're in Atlanta, then your quarterback goes down, and you're trailing. I think people, revisionist history, don't remember you were trailing. You had to come from behind with a backup. And I remember watching the ending of that game and thinking to myself, I don't know what's going to happen in the playoff, but I got to think, watching Georgia football all my life, that right there feels like one of the most rewarding moments in time that I remember any Georgia team having. What was the immediate aftermath of that like?
Proud of our culture, because I think our culture helped win that game. Our familiarity with the conference helped win that game. I mean, Texas was a beat-up football team, too. They had played a really tough schedule. They had an offensive tackle who's going to be a great player out. Their quarterback was beat up and banged up. But at that point in time, everybody in the SEC is. You've played everybody. And that group we had was resilient. And we won it because we won the line of scrimmage. We stopped the run on defense. That's why we won that game. Okay, and we ran the ball better than we did most of the year. Not the Georgia standard, but better than we did most of the year in that game. So we won the game based on our culture, our toughness, all the things we built our program on. It was a program win. It was not a pretty win. It was a program win. And I'm probably most proud of that, of all the games, because of all the things we faced within that game. That was a tough one. It was the first year of what the new model of the SEC is going to look like. I think the new norm in the SEC is going to be the records you saw across the league last year. Hey, it's tough. You're going to have losses. Who bounces back from the losses?
Yeah. I also thought about the scheduling dynamic in the conference right now. I'm not sure if changes are on the horizon or not, but I've got my own, sort of personal way I like to judge a strength of schedule in March and then redo it in December. And I'm looking at what I think the toughest and relatively easiest schedule is in a Big Ten conference or an SEC right now, and there's a gulf. To me, between one versus the other, not that there's an easy one, obviously. It's not your job to do it, but yet you're in the foxhole dealing with it. Is there a way that you would prefer scheduling to work, or is it just kind of we got to deal with what we deal with?
Well, I think it works within your conference right now, right? Like, so our school does our schedule, but our conference dictates a lot of that with conference decisions of how the scheduling is going to go. But outside of our conference games, we pick our opponents. At least we do a long time ago, because a lot of these games, like the Clemson game last year, that came a while back, like way back when I first got here. So everybody deals with it differently. You'd love to see it managed from 10,000 feet of one person picking the strings if everybody was, an NFL model. So it was much easier to do in terms of balancing things out and making things even. We're just not in that mold right now.
Yeah.
We may be leaning that way. We may be moving that way, but we're just not there.
All right, hypothetically, this is not from the league office. This is purely from some guy who's sitting here talking to you. Hypothetically, if I were to snap my fingers and the new scheduling model was you didn't find out your schedule until February. You didn't find out your schedule until late winter, early spring of that year. Fundamentally, how does that change your prep? How does that change how you structure spring? Like, is that a huge deal or a very minor deal? It's
not a huge deal from a coaching perspective. Prep for the game. I mean, most teams don't even have the roster yet. They're still dealing with the portal. So it's more about the travel of the college student in the college towns. So booking of hotels, how you're going to do travel, where you're going to go. Some of these towns don't have any hotels, so they're booked. They're especially in the SEC market. You're looking at Oxford, Athens, Tuscaloosa. You're looking at cities that they need time to prep that and they need time to prepare for it. But can it be done? Absolutely. From a coach's perspective, you could give us our schedule in March. And we'll be fine with the schedule that we get in March. We can react to that and get ready for it. You're preparing your own team. You're not worried about the opponent until halfway through fall camp. So there's a lot of football operations things that go on outside that have to happen, but not from a standpoint of a coach.
You guys on paper did not have a ton of coaching roster churn. I know you probably have an army of analysts that aren't on paper that you see come and go every cycle, but normally I'm used to you losing some coaches. Yeah. And you didn't really have a ton of that you dealt with. Now, I always listen to a guy who lost a ton of coaches, and their first press conference is, we love getting fresh ideas and new perspective in here. Then the same guy retains the staff. He said, it's a godsend to retain the staff. I hate replacing them. What is the benefit of keeping all those guys and the synergy, especially when you don't have that on your player roster the way you used to?
Yeah, it's a big bonus to me. I mean, I'll spend because we had 4 the year before that change, and you can make that a positive of new ideas and things, and I would do the same thing. I would, given the preference of the two, I want the continuity and the retention because the relationships they form with the current players gives you a better chance to keep them because ultimately they know as parents better. All right, when you get changeover in position coaches, there's always a little bit of lack of communication here or there, and then a kid's more apt to leave. The retention of relationships of people they've been recruiting. So the sophomores and juniors in high school, they've been recruiting since they were 9th and 10th graders. That carries over. So it helps in recruiting to retain people because people want to know that coach is going to be there. They want to know they've got a relationship with them. So I like the positives of the retention more than I do the positives of, well, I'm going to get new ideas and different things. And I think you're going to see a little more of that because the shift has been, athletic departments have said, you know what, I'm maybe a little slower to change this guy as the head coach or this guy as the OC or this guy as the DC because it's a big expenditure. And I'm expending money on my players as opposed to my coaching staff. So there's been a little bit of a freeze. When you look at the SEC, I don't know that we had one coaching change this year, right? I don't think there's one head coaching change.
No, yeah, you're
Somebody
right.
said even at the coordinator level, it might have been 1 or 2 within the entire league. That's 16 times 2. That's a 32 spots for coordinators. Maybe 3 or 4 changed. So there's just less change in general because they don't want to pay and they want to pay the players.
I've looked at facility enhancements get put on hold and thought of that being the reason. I don't know that I've thought about coaching changes maybe being dialed back a bit. Guys that previously would have been on the fence fall back in. Just because you don't want to pay the buyout, you don't want to pay the new expenditure. When you look around a coaching room, how quickly can you tell a guy is a future head coach?
I think it would probably take me a spring practice, one half a year, like either the season or the season I call the off season, which is January to July, January to June. You can tell a lot in that time, how they prepare their meetings, how they prepare the jobs. We give guys different off-season projects. You'll know pretty quick, does he have his ducks in a row? Can he handle talking in front of the team? I put every assistant in front of the team in some way, shape, or fashion. And what does he do when he's in front of the team? How does he manage that? I think you can usually tell within 6 months.
When you think back on your coaching career, you think of the whole Dunning-Kruger effect of at the outset, you got that period where you think you know everything. And then you got the period where you're at your lowest point. You think you know nothing. Then there's a gradual climb the rest of your career to trying to get to where you want to go. Do you have like moments in mind when you think back about lowest points, most important teaching moments, that time that sucked being the most valuable to get me to where I am today? Like, where does your mind go if someone asks you that?
My first mind went to, I never was at that one moment where you said, you think you know it all. That was probably in college as a player when I thought I could, out-coach the coaches or help my dad, who was a high school coach, and I was giving him ideas because I thought I knew it all. But there was never a moment for me in the culture I came from of thinking this, I was a coach and I knew more than the coach. Like when I got into coaching, I was here. Joe Kynes, Coach Donnie gave me a job. I'll never forget, I went in, he showed me how to break down tape, and it was before the computers, before we inputted things. And you had to write every play. You had to write first down, second quarter, and you had to write down 10, what yard line it was on. You entered everything by hand, and then you drew the play. And you had to do 10 games that way. I'll never forget, we played Purdue in a bowl game in either 99 or 2000. Here's Drew Brees, Outback Bowl. I broke down every game of their season and had to hand draw every play and everything. And I think there is no like growing up in the coaching profession like we did. They all have analytics, computers. That data is entered somewhere else and sold, so it just comes immediately to you after the game. We did that by hand. And I'm like, man, that made me a better coach because the detail that I had to go into to do it was tedious. But the detail that had to go into it, being a GA at Florida State, working for Bobby Bowden and Mickey Andrews, the smallest things that I felt like I had to work on to get better. And then you said that, and I thought immediately about Nick and working for him my first year. And, that was where you said you don't feel like you know anything. You feel like every day is the low point. There was a lot of days at LSU that I was like, oh, man, I thought I was a good coach. I didn't know anything because you're learning from somebody who knows a lot.
If I'm a 23-year-old like grad assistant, if I'm coaching, man, if I'm worth my salt, I know the history of the game. So I know who my head coach is. I know where you've been. I know your story. How often do guys sort of seek stories from the previous eras? Like, how inquisitive are they when they've got time to talk like that about what it was like there and what it was like then?
I don't think they do. It was funny because the other night I went and spoke at a touchdown club event in Macon, and we were flying home, and I was with a couple of young coaches on the plane that had come down there with me, and they were flying back, and I was in a good mood. I was finished. I wasn't tired, and the day was about over, and we just started talking about old stories, and I started talking about, and I realized at that point, I'm almost 50. These guys are 24, 25, and I'm telling them stories, and they're hanging on the edge of their seat wanting to listen to the story. But we as coaches now, at least the coaches that I know that are my age and older, they don't take the time to tell those stories anymore because you're spending all your time on the players.
Yeah.
There is no good old boy, I'm going to sit back, talk, tell stories. I'm worried about something or some issue, something going on. We don't have the meetings I had in 2003 and 4 where you're sitting around with the coaches just kind of talking. You're always doing something. You're meeting on analytics. You're meeting on a new facility. You're meeting with a player. You're trying to recruit a player. You're trying to talk contracts and NIL and where the salary cap. There is no time for storytelling time. I mean, you don't get it. But as a young coach, you should feed on that. You should want that. You should grow from those lessons that older guys have learned.
Now, in your profession, so you've been through several generations of your profession now. Plus, you played the game. So you've seen several generations and iterations of our sport. I think back just in society in general about things that I wish would come back, but I know it's not coming back. Yeah. Like the pre-cell phone era, what live sporting events and concerts were like, where everyone is just, both hands are free, you're just focused, you're living in the moment. Mm-hmm. I wish that had come back. I know it's not coming back, but I long for it. Is there anything in your profession, maybe what you just talked about or something else that you long for, you miss that? It's a waste of time to think about it too much because it's not coming back.
Man, I would say I long for knowing that regardless of how we coach the kid, they're going to be here the whole time. Like, you didn't have to worry about that. I mean, yeah, they could leave. They had to sit out, whatever. And everybody says, well, the coach can leave. But, I mean, coach has a contract and he gets fired, and completely different situation. I wish, because the success they get, the reward I saw kids get for sticking through, and it's recent as Quay Walker. I mean, he wanted to leave. I always use that example, but there's so many kids that wanted to, that stuck it out, and they're so appreciative. I never get a kid that comes back on the other side and says, oh, boy, coach, I'm glad I got out of there. It worked out really good for me on the other side of that. You know, I wish that they could. Sometimes I think back to that old freshman rule. People don't know that back in the 70s, 80s, before Herschel, you couldn't play as a freshman.
Right.
I sometimes wonder, that could have been the greatest rule ever because there was no expectations. You couldn't play. Now, they're good enough, they're talented enough, and they need them. But if they didn't, there wouldn't be this I got to get out of here, this notion of I got to leave, I got to live up to it. The mental health aspect that I'm seeing impact our young kids, it's off the charts. I mean, there's an era coming up of they have an expectation when they walk in here that they have to perform to their NIL level, and they can't live up to it. It's not that, I mean, they can't live up to it. The Ryan and Jeremiah, the J.J. Smith, those guys are exceptions to the rule. They're exceptions to the rule. It's the rest of the kids who now think they should be that, and they can't live up to it. And so I don't like what that does to a kid mentally from a standpoint of his career.
That was always the big, I guess, risk more than danger, wasn't it? Was when we headed towards this world, the outside world was going to develop an emotional callus that they used to reserve for pro sports. Pro sports, you trash a guy, whatever. They're mercenaries. They're assets. They're not real people. College was always college kids. Right. Well, when you put $800,000 in the pocket of a true freshman, and maybe the guy sitting in Section 232 who contributes to the NIL views himself as paying the kid's salary, right. Well, then there's expectation. It's no different than a coach. If I pay you $3 million more per year than I used to, I should get expedited results. Correct. There is no microwave, though. There never has been. There never will be. You're grown up. Like, you've matured. You understand how to deal with that. 18-year-old, that's a total crapshoot.
That's right. It's not fair what the expectations are for them, okay? And you can sit back and say, well, their salary warrants that. Their NIL warrants that. They didn't really, they didn't make those rules.
Right.
They didn't make the game. They're just playing by the game, and they should be rewarded financially, but they should not for their emotional state of being. We're going to see a cause and effect down the line where there's going to be a body of, I don't know if it's 50%, 60% of these high-level college athletes that were on high-level NIL that struggle in the real world because they never had to work and achieve. Their greatest earning years may fall between 18 and 23. What are they going to do from 23 to 30 when they have a real job? That's my concern for them.
I think the toughest part for an outside onlooker is you may be working construction, you may be driving a FedEx truck, you're just living your life. And if you're doing that, you're probably around people who are your age, who are like you.
Yeah.
You're not around 18 to 22-year-old kids all day. So you get a glimpse at what the average 19-year-old's mentality is when you see it online, when you watch a football game, when you look at an interview. And so all you're doing, if you're a 52-year-old insurance salesman, is you're comparing this kid's mentality to what would have been acceptable when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And you're judging them by previous generation standards. And I think that goes back to a lot of what you're talking about, because that's what I see. You hear the kids these days quote all the time. And also, you look at a lot of, maybe to draw it back to our world, what people perceive as wrong about college football.
Correct.
You got the meaningless bowl game era.
Yeah.
You've got the mercenary player going to 4 different programs era. You just said something really important. I talked to Mac Brown about this last year, and he went like an hour on it. He said, all these changes, I don't remember the kids asking for any of them.
Sure.
I remember some adults with their own agendas pushing for it. I remember other adults not having the backbone to stand up and stand against it. Now, here we are.
Right.
And, with every problem you have with a kid, there are 10 adults over here that are probably as much, if not more, to blame than the kid himself.
100%. They're playing by the rules they were given. The adults in the room made the rules and made them the way they are. And there's probably a balance somewhere in the middle that's needed. But at the end of the day, our job is get education, become the best person off the field, and then develop as a football player on the field and help put people that can contribute to society into society. So they're better people for having come to whatever university they come to. And I'm not sure, at least in football, one of the highest paid NIL, and maybe college basketball, that we're doing them justice by what they're learning while they're here.
So you're just entering spring as you and I are talking, and by the time people watch this, you'll be midway through spring. I heard you talk the other day about how maybe your true freshman class, conditioning-wise, aren't really where you want them to be. Now, a lot of people listen to that, because I listen to a lot of the media around Georgia, and they say, well, here's what Kirby really means when he says that, which is a pretty common refrain. And I sit here and talk to you. My general experience with you is you're just going to shoot straight and tell me what you think, and if you don't think it, you won't say it. If you had to play a game today, you'd be a disaster. But that's what spring is for.
Correct.
So what are some of the key things that have to come together for this group for it to round into the form it needs to be able to win in the fall?
We've got to have more people play winning football, which starts with passion, energy, and toughness. All right, like do you love the game? Do you love being physically tough and violent? And can you sustain? I mean, I don't know that I've ever gone out there and had freshmen that I said, oh man, that guy's ready to go. He can sustain. Every good freshman we've had has struggled like hell in spring. That's okay. But the struggle has to advance you, and you have to get better, and you got to like push through this barrier. You can't have a governor on you and go, oh gosh, I can't make it. Oh gosh, I'm not. You got to push through that so that practice 7, 8, 9, you're not looking for oxygen and water. You're able to take your rep volume and go in that small space. And the good ones do that. We've had a lot of, Brock pushed right on through that bubble. We got a couple young guys right now pushing through that bubble. But you got to push through that bubble to make it. And some kids aren't comfortable with that. We have to make them uncomfortable.
I had a guy on last night's show, right before I came down here. He said, hey, I'm a Georgia fan. I like a lot of the players, the young players on the team. He said, I've got concern that Kirby's going to favor seniority over talent at quarterback. I gave my answer to that. What kind of response do you give to that?
Well, talent at quarterback is a beautiful thing. You have to be able to go out and execute at that position. There's a lot of positions that you can take talent over seniority. At quarterback, you got to take the guy that gives you the best chance to win the game. That includes talent. That includes decision making, because that position can get you beat faster than it can win the game. Because all it takes is a fumble, a poor decision, a misprotection, sack, fumble, and the game's over. You can't afford to have those kind of mistakes, even with a talented guy. And we have talented guys. And that assumption, I guess, is a Gunner Ryan or a Gunner somebody. Gunner's very talented. He's been playing a lot of football for us. Ryan's very talented. Every school in the country wanted him. So we have talented players. We've got to get the right talented players around them. That's the big decision, is like who's around us on defense and offense, because we do have some good young freshmen and sophomores that have a chance to beat out some older players.
You guys, as head coaches, are in a situation right now where you got a really tough conversation to have about roster size, because the amount of scholarships you have, the amount of available spots you have is changing. If you sit in front of me and you broke 17 of my team rules, it's not hard for me to tell you you're no longer on my team.
Sure.
If you did nothing wrong and you work your tail off for me, but all of a sudden the structure of the game has changed and I've got to tell you, we had a spot for you previously, we don't have a spot for you now, that's tough.
It's tough.
How far out in front of that did you try and get, and how, just brutally honest with guys, do you have to be as early as possible about where they stand and what kind of options they need to explore?
Yeah, we haven't talked a lot about it to our guys. I think they understand it's coming, but at the same time, we're being told we have until the first game to make a lot of those decisions.
Right.
So the roster is going to have to reduce near the first game. I don't think it's real fair to take a kid all the way up to the first game and tell them. So our plan all along has been to notify guys, hey, look, you'll be in limbo. I don't know that you'll be in the 105. You might be in that gap between 105 and 125 or 130. I want to be honest and upfront, because they have a portal window that's going to pass. They would have an opportunity to go somewhere else and play. But most of those kids would be entering that portal with no film, no tape, and they'd be going on a hope, when really their desire was to come to UGA, get a degree, and play football at UGA. I don't want to take that away from them. I mean, that's what our lifelong, some of our best lessons learned in this room, this team room, are from kids who didn't get a penny and worked their tail off. Dan Jackson, Lad McConkey. I mean, those are great stories, but we got a ton of other ones who came out and practiced every day of their life, and they set an example for other people. Some of those kids are going to lose that opportunity in this model. We accepted that when we chose to go down this road.
I'll get you out of here on this. So, I mean, my hope is you got 70 years left to do this. Just stick around forever. But there is a world now where guys have 20, 30 years post-retirement to go do whatever they want to do. Your former boss, very, very famously, is doing that right now with College Game Day. Do you look around well down the road and see something that catches your interest? Do you see something out there right now so it makes you say, I wonder, not now and not anytime soon, but eventually, I wonder if I could try my hand at that. I'd be interested how good I'd be at that.
I don't have one thing in particular. I mean, I'd love to be on the golf course every day, but I know I'm not going to be a pro golfer, and definitely not on the senior tour, so I'm not going to make a career of it. I would love to be, down the road a consultant somewhere that helps young head coaches. I would love to be a guy that says, okay, how do we get more minority head coaches? How do we get more minority coordinators? Can I help? Can I go help develop those guys and do things? Because it's really important to me, the coaches I've had work for me get an opportunity to grow, to see Dale McGee go out and do it, see Fran Brown go out and do it. I just love that. And I want to give guys opportunities like I've had. And I feel like I've been very blessed to be around some really good ones in Bobby Bowden, my dad, Coach Saban. So I want to be able to give that back. If there was a way to go and be almost a consultant to different schools and sit in and say, hey, how can we do this better? I enjoy that. And there would be no attachment, right? I didn't have to stay and be there for the season. You just, go and help out.
Kirby, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh.